If there's one thing we can all agree on, it's that humans will believe almost anything. On Blasphemy with Chris and Marnee, we take a look at some of these beliefs, uncover their very human origins, how they've developed and changed over time, and the very real consequences they had in society and culture. Impacts that continue even today in our lives. Welcome to Blasphemy. My name is Chris Setti. That was loud. And with me, as always, is my beautiful, amazing wife, Marnee. How you doing?
Hey, good.
Good. Awesome. Just a quick reminder, by the way, you can find us at blasphemypodcast.com. And you can also find us on Apple Podcasts. Rate and subscribe and leave a review and all that bullshit. That'd be awesome. All right, so tonight we're going to conclude our series on the life and impact of Helena Blavatsky. Mm-hmm. First, though, just in current events, I watched the inauguration today. It was pretty awesome. I have to admit, I'm not really into I've watched inaugurations of presidents that I voted for, presidents I didn't vote for. And usually it's just like, oh, blah, 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 whatever. It's all ceremonial. I'm get on with it. Jesus Christ, fucking who cares? This one was different. I don't know. They did a really good job. I was jaded and ready to just be, I watched the speeches. They were great. I really do think they were perfectly crafted for the time. It was really well delivered. I felt a really good feeling.
I only got to see, I saw picked it up midway through Biden's speech, which was good. And I saw Amanda. What was her last name?
Oh, she was incredible.
Her poem.
She was incredible.
Yeah.
Stirring. Yeah, incredible.
It was
just the force that she commanded
amazing,
standing there. It was
eloquent.
I was frozen.
Phenomenal.
Watching her. Yeah, I was blown away by her.
Yeah.
So then while I'm cooking dinner...
But that's all I saw because I got that and then I had to go to work.
Yeah. So while I'm cooking dinner, I have the news on. It's live. And because I'm like, what the fuck's happening, And this is after, throughout the day I'm watching. I told Marnee earlier, I all of a sudden I get this notification that there's a White House press briefing. I'm like, oh, fuck. And so I'm going to watch this.
It's like our trigger, our fight or flight kicks in when there's a
red alert
press
sound.
briefing
You're
after the last 4 years. We're like, fuck, what now?
And so I go, I click on it and fucking watch it. And I'm standing there with my mouth open fuck, this is the most competent. This young woman is commanding this podium and with facts, truth, honest. It was wild how strange that felt, and how much it filled me with a little bit of hope. I'm like, oh, look, I know a bunch of people are going to say a bunch of shit, and we're going to have all this kind of bullshit going on, and people blah blah blah. But at least the public face of our government,
just some normalcy of I think we've forgotten that that's normal.
We did.
We didn't pay attention to it before because it was so normal. It was kind of boring.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're just in awe of just competent normalcy.
And now I'm boring normalcy, man. Yeah. I crave it. Yeah. Give me something. Oh, fucking Jesus.
I even feel like maybe that's why the inauguration just hit you because it's so
And honestly, what helped the whole thing is Donald Trump not being there.
Yeah.
It was great. I'm so fucking glad he did that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a fucking asshole for being the person that would do that.
Yeah, what a tiny little fucking coward man.
Yeah, but
glad you're not there.
Him not being there.
Yeah.
They had George W. Bush rather, and obviously they didn't dig up George H.W. Bush. That would have been weird and morbid. But George W. Bush was there, Clinton was there, Obama was there, and they interviewed. They kind of all shared words, kind of standing in this, 6 feet apart and all those guys. And it was great.
Humans can.
Yeah, it was fucking great. Well, anyway, so then I'm cooking dinner, and the news is on, and they break to the concert, right? And I'm like, okay, it's Tom Hanks is hosting this whole thing, and he's cutting to, and then in between it, they're doing really cool things honoring different nurses and teachers and like they're UPS drivers, like people on the
Awesome.
front lines. So
Yeah,
it was cool.
that's
It was
awesome.
really it was kind of awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the concert's growing, and I'm just like, oh, okay, here we go, And so the first couple, I'm just like, it felt very solemn, and I was like a little bit like, what the fuck? Everything is so like slow and like meaningful and like laced with like Christian ideas, and I'm like, what the fuck? So then all of a sudden, let's see, what was the first one?
Well,
Oh, they
Biden's
go.
very Catholic.
No, I know that.
He's very
I know
religious.
that. I know that. And whatever. I also have come to expect that because it doesn't matter who the fuck they are. For some reason, we got to play to that whole thing.
Yeah,
But
got to pander to the Christians.
got to. But then they go like, coming up is Aunt Clemens, and I'm like, I don't know who that is. And they're like, and Justin Timberlake. I'm like, oh, I fucking love Justin Timberlake. I'm gonna be honest with you. I fucking love him. Like in the 90s, it was weird. Marnie and I had two different experiences of the 90s
Yes.
because I was like out in the world, like trying to make money for all these kids that we kept having. And Marnie was super religious, and so she was determined to stay at home, and she was totally anti pop
just
culture and stuff like that.
Did not know what was happening
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
90s.
yeah. So, like NSYNC and all that kind of shit, she wasn't really exposed to. But I was like, Justin Timberlake's cool. But then I saw him in like movies, and he's fucking great. I don't know what to say. He's hilarious. He's clearly fucking talented as shit. And so I'm like, cool, I'm down with this. And the song was fucking amazing. I'm like literally
What
almost.
song was it?
It's like better times ahead. I don't even know. I was just like floored by the talent and the way that they. I don't know. Maybe I was just
You
in
were
that mood.
Just in it.
Yeah, seriously, I was like almost crying. I'm like, what the fuck is happening to me? So then they go like, let's watch J-Lo sing "This Land Is My Land," right?
Yeah.
Which I'm like,
My Country 'Tis of Thee.
No, that's
This
a
land?
different
Oh,
song.
it's a different song.
Yeah.
I heard she sang My Country 'Tis of Thee.
No,
Did she
this
sing
land is my land.
Okay.
This land is your
Yeah, I know
right.
that.
Isn't that? Yeah, that's what she's saying.
My...
And I'm thinking, okay, whatever the song we sang in like second grade. Okay, I'll watch this. But J Lo, I mean, I don't know. Maybe whatever she does is just turns to magic. But it was very moving. Her singing that song. That was written by a bunch of white people going like, this land is our land. Like there is a kind of a like manifest destiny kind of attitude behind it. And I
Yeah.
felt like she was reclaiming it for like, oh no, fuck you. It's
Yeah.
all of our land, right?
Yeah.
And then like next thing you know, like they
I want to
fucking
see it.
no, you'll see it because
Yeah.
it's all over the place now on YouTube and shit like that, and it'll be all over the TV tomorrow. But then they cut to like this like Latin rap or hip hop, I guess. Man, it sounds so old. Just Latin music. It was like Latin pop music, like Despacito. Like that
Yeah,
guy was
yeah,
on
yeah,
there
yeah.
and shit. And I kind of secretly kept going like, God, Justin Bieber, hop in here. But then I'm like, I'm so glad that white kid from Canada didn't hop in
Didn't.
there. Because it was like this cool Latin. This guy just fucking, it was awesome. And so I'm like, okay, this is getting pretty good. And then like Yo-Yo Ma played the cello, whatever. I don't fucking give a shit. But it was insane. Like I had the speakers on really loud. We have like those Apple HomePod speakers, and they're pretty good. And so I had them all cranked up, and it was it was pretty good. Like, but I'm not a big classical cello music fan. But then they're like, next up, the Foo Fighters. I'm like, oh, fuck, yeah, right? So they're like, he introduces it by saying, my mom's a public school teacher. She was for 30 years or whatever, and like, so this was for teachers. And so they play Time Like These, and it starts out in this like slow, it's just Dave Grohl, which I love Dave Grohl. I always did. And I remember when the Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit video came on, it was the world premiere. MTV was on, back when MTV was fucking still kind of awesome. And I just remember everyone stopping and watching the TV kind of like, what the fuck is happening, And, after that, obviously, Nirvana became a big deal. And I remember always being fascinated with Dave Grohl for some reason, the fucking drummer.
I so don't know the 90s. I didn't know why you went over to Nirvana when you were talking about Dave
Right,
Grohl.
because he
I
was
didn't
the
know
drummer
he
of
was
Nirvana. And we would get, we got a bunch of magazines there too, like Thrasher magazine and all these like fucking like whatever pop culture magazines too. And I remember reading one and they were interviewing them, and it was like Kurt Cobain being all poetic and like deep and like melancholy and I'm gonna kill myself, which he eventually did. But Dave Grohl was just like, I'm just here to fucking play rock and roll
Yeah.
music and, do my thing.
Yeah.
And I just remember going like, fuck yeah, see, this is fucking. So the Foo Fighters comes out and it's like this real slow like version of like Times Like These, and I'm like, God damn it, like, because you don't even know that song, probably.
Smells like Teen Spirit. I remember.
No, not
Which
that.
one?
That's Nirvana.
Oh, sorry.
That's no.
Which one?
Foo Fighters.
Which song?
Times Like These.
No.
Okay. Anyway,
If I heard it, it would probably. See, I don't know the names
it's
of the
it's
bands
a song that is
or the players.
fast, you would say.
The musicians, the players, the musicians. But if I heard the song,
You
I'd be
would
like,
know
I
it.
know the song.
No, you would know it. You would know it, and it's a fast song. It's a rockin' song, But it's like this super low. But then all of a sudden you start feeling like, oh, he's going somewhere with this, and it just kept dragging you on and on. It was kind of perfect because it was kind of like you're waiting, and then in an instant, it went from like this super like drawn out, just Dave Grohl singing, no instruments playing or anything like that, and the drummer just all of a sudden moved from just sitting there to like full blown into the song and like literally a split. It was really great. I mean, I have to say, Demi Lovato, they're like next up Demi Lovato. I'm like, okay. I don't know. Maybe grown up woman Demi Lovato is different than I never really understood that, but she sang that song Lovely Day. Lovely Day, Lovely Day.
Oh yeah.
It was fantastic. And then they had Broadway. I don't know. Anyway, if you didn't watch it, you should go watch it. And if you don't feel hopeful and like good after it, look at yourself.
I want to watch it.
So let's get into the final episode. We're gonna finish up our look at Helena Blavatsky. Okay. We've looked at her life. We've looked at her, kind of the journey that she's been on, right? And how, spiritualism and just kind of that whole milieu that existed at the late 19th century. She kind of slipped in there and made up her stuff. In last episode, in episode 3, we talked about her view of human development, right? And how she picked up on some scientific stuff that was going on, and then obviously tossed in her messages from the masters, and she created this whole thing. So we went through like the root races and kind of got an understanding of like this is how they were like mixing kind of magical thinking with like current scientific, pseudo-scientific now, but at the time scientific thinking. So before we get into this, let me just acknowledge a couple of sources that I used for this particular episode.
Okay.
So the first one is a book by Nicholas Goodrich Clark. He's probably the preeminent researcher of of a field that has become big, which I guess you would call Nazi occultism. Okay, and so his book, The Occult Roots of Nazism. I've read it multiple times. It's fucking nuts. He's the best one to read. I'm not going to get into Nazi occultism, really. It's more about the run-up to that. But there's a big debate around how much, like, say, Hitler, for instance, was into a cult. We'll talk about that a little bit today. I don't think he very much was, but there were a lot of people in this movement inspiring. The most dedicated people to this movement were very, very much invested in occultic thinking. And so he's kind of like I would say the best material out there if you're interested in that. There is so many documentaries, and some of them go so far out there. And, again, we'll talk a little bit about, Nazis and the occult a little bit, but there's a lot of good stuff out there. And if you're looking to read a book about it, The Occult Roots of Nazism by Nicholas Goodrich Clark, it's awesome. And I also used a book called Invisible Eagle, The History of Nazi Occultism by a guy named Alan Baker. I found it for free on the internet. I don't even know who this dude is or whatever, but he wrote a great fucking little book that was
Alan.
fully denoted with all of the places he got his stuff so I could go see and it was pretty fucking good. Anyway, so let's get into this. So, Helena influenced virtually every corner of what we have today as Western esoteric thought and philosophy. For good or for bad, she is probably the most influential figure in that world, especially in our modern time, right? So she lived in a world that was getting real esoteric. I know we like to think that all the spiritual stuff came in the 60s, but dude, things were wackier in the 20s. Things were wackier in the 1910s, the fucking 1890s.
That's so interesting to learn.
Yeah. And it was this, so Western occultism.
But it makes sense.
Yeah, Western occultism is really based off this mix of things. One, Kabbalism. So Kabbalah factors, as you noted, as you pointed out, very, very, knowledgeably in our last episode, how she based it on. So that was actually a big influence on Western esoteric thought. Interesting, it came from Judaism, but whatever.
Why do you say that's interesting?
Because they're all fucking anti-Semites who are fucking into this shit.
Right, they hate Jews, but they're grabbing onto their spiritualism.
And then they make up magical tales of how, the truth was really for the Aryans and the Jews stole it or some bullshit. It's so fucking stupid.
Are you
anyway,
going to lead up to it's rooted in Kabbalism, the Nazi stuff?
Well, yeah, because,
oh my gosh.
Okay, I'm going to say the Nazi stuff was rooted in Theosophy, and Theosophy was deeply rooted in fucking Kabbalism.
Kabbalism, yeah, okay.
Now, again, Western esotericism, it wasn't just Kabbalism.
Wow. Did they know that?
Well, yeah, but they found a way to get around that and how the Jews weren't worthy of it. I don't know. They found a way to... It doesn't matter. We're not going to talk about that. Okay. But Kabbalism was a big influence in Western esotericism, the formation of it at this time, and in the Middle Ages, right? Which is really where all this stuff comes from.
Yeah.
They weren't coming up with new shit either, but the Middle Ages kind of brought this mystical, Gnostic kind of version of Christianity. Kabbalism and astrology kind of came together, and that really formed tarot. Western... Well, tarot is a product of that esoteric thought, is what it is. Those are just pictorial representations of Kabbalistic, astrological, and even Christian symbolism.
Yeah, totally. All of
so again, this is a world where this shit is people are plugged into this and stuff like that. And Helena emerges on the scene, as we've seen. Inserts herself, is a master at just, I guess, telling a story and drawing people in. Very charismatic and manipulative. Charismatic. What did I say?
Charismatic or something?
Charismatic.
I don't know.
That's when you're charming while you're doing exercises.
Calisthenic. Calisthenic.
Yeah, but anyway, as we have seen, Helena made up a system that borrowed from all kinds of different religions, filtered through the spiritualist context of her day, sprinkled with early scientific ideas, with a huge dose of fantasy in order to make it alluring to potential believers. That's all well and good. However, when you're running a cult based on words that you claim are literally divine, things are ripe for justifying some extreme shit.
Always. When you fucking tie your word to the divine.
Right.
All the...
Whatever you do
channeling,
can
God,
be offloaded.
Higher power, Holy Spirit, all the fucking...
Right.
You can't argue with me because the divine fucking spoke through me.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Whatever you do...
that infuriates me.
Whatever you do can be offloaded onto some truth that you are saying, that you aren't saying. They are.
Yeah.
No matter what it may look like, because this divinely inspired information says so. So it's kind of hey, it's not me.
Yeah.
It's God.
I can say whatever. I can, and you can't argue with it because God, and you're probably
do you realize
bad or
what
resisting
what a huge justification that was for slavery in this country was those arguments of, hey, they found it in the Bible because, again, they don't understand the Bible, so then it just becomes this material to make shit up about. And they found ways to justify owning other people and the right of masters over slaves and all this shit because, it's not me that's saying that. It's fucking God.
Right? It.
So, it's, people could be like, hey, it's not me that's saying the Jews are whatever. It's the masters who told Helena, So how can we argue with that? So much historical horror, slaughter, and genocide has been propped up by an application of belief supposedly delivered by the magical whoever, right? Whoever your magic source is. It is powerful leverage over the masses and always seems to generate terrible acts despite the original intentions of the cult leader. I hear a lot about that. Well, they never meant that. It doesn't fucking matter. When you make shit up, and you say it comes from some unquestionable force, you're responsible for your actions after that. Whether I don't believe Helena intended for her things to be taken where they were, but they didn't have to twist it that much. It was already there. She put it out there. You know what I mean? Like the shit she said was from these fucking divine source, was already out
They
there.
took it to its logical end.
Exactly. That's a good point. They took it to its logical end. Well, if you're saying this, well, then that must mean this. Right. It's a good way to put it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I say this because I don't want to paint Helena as only the impetus of ideas that would lead to genocidal racial ideologies and programs. She was a lot of other things too, but once you inspire the Nazis, not sure anyone cares about that other shit. I'm like, oh great, you inspired some ethereal, whatever stupid new age nonsense that, is still around. Great. But you also inspired the Nazis, so we need to talk about that. I don't know what we're going to talk about. Crystals? Like, fuck off. Since here on Blasphemy, we study beliefs in order to understand their origin points, adaptations, and the real-world effects faithful devotion can lead to, we are going to focus on the bad part of her legacy here. And honestly, who gives a shit if all she did...
part.
Yeah, exactly. Who gives a shit if all she did was lay the foundations of modern spiritual thought in the West? The magical, ethereal, wishful thinking spiritual ideas that harm no one and lead nowhere are fine, whatever. However, we do have to balance it with the effect her ideas had that were in no way harmless and absolutely worked against the supposed spiritualistic ideal of a harmonious and healed world. Remember, that was the original intent of spiritualism. Remember way back in episode 1? They're like, if we harness this force, we can heal our divisions. We can bring equality and prosper, right? And it's turned into, wait, there's different kinds of people, as other influences come in, science, and racial thought and all these things that are propping up. It's fucking nuts, right?
So, yeah, our effort to idealize and heavenize a world where everything's perfect and united and loving and...
Yeah.
I know this sounds super cynical, but we can experience those things within our life without going, let's make the whole world this, because it's not going to fucking happen. We've been around for millions of years not doing it yet.
Right.
And
what do they call that? They call that sacrificing the good for the perfect.
Right. Be here in what is, and if between you and the people around you, you do your best and love, but quit with the everybody needs, this is the perfect world we need to create. I don't know.
No, I'm with you. I feel that way. I feel that way, and this is why I have a little bit of hope. Is like it's funny. Your mom texted me this morning. She's like, "I just watched the inauguration of Joe Biden's speech. Please tell me he's a centrist. He seems like a centrist." It was almost like, please tell me he's not some radical socialist.
Why?
Because that's the messaging that's out on the right. Is he's an agent of China. He's a literal Luciferian child molester.
The context of my mom saying that, I don't understand.
Your mom and I have that relationship where she trusts me, I think.
Yeah, no,
which
I know,
is great.
But was she worried about him being a...
No, I think that she was feeling the same thing that a lot of people are feeling,
this feels good?
Yeah. Your mom she's not super opinionated on politics. She's not going to go there. But, I feel like she felt a breath of fresh air, and she just wanted to check with me, I can trust this guy, right? Because I'm not being, sucked into something that I'm going to hate later.
Yeah.
Which is great. Hopefully a lot of people are doing that.
Yeah.
But anyway, all I'm saying is it seems like we could have done with less racist shit coming from the masters. That's all I'm saying.
For sure. Less racist shit coming from anyone,
if you're starting
everywhere.
with let's all come together and heal this, and then hey, let's talk about how we're separate races. I don't know. That seems like a divergence. So in the late 19th century, occult and esoteric revivals were happening all over the place, not just in America. One place that was a hotbed of new spiritual esoteric thought, and, kind of coupled with the rejection of Christianity, kind of like what was going on in America, was Germany. Germany had its own revival around religion, philosophy, and paganism going on. They were in the midst of what they called a Volkish revival.
I think I've heard of that.
Okay. It was a back-to-nature movement promoting agrarian living, nudism, naturopathy, vegetarianism, a return to the old Germanic pagan gods, and a departure from rapidly modernizing life.
What years was this?
This is the fucking last few decades of the late 19th century, early 20th century. 1890s into the early 1900s.
Okay.
Health spas, communes, homesteading, environmental priorities, farm-to-table diets, pagan philosophies, all happening over 100 years ago. We've invented nothing. There was really a conflagration of socio-economic, political...
I'm going to stop you there for a second.
Okay.
Because the reason I was checking on what the time frame was is because I'm pretty sure this was around the emergence of the coming out of the Victorian era and into...
Yeah, very much so.
The Craftsman, the Art Nouveau, the
Oh,
Art Deco.
when it comes to design?
Yes, because that's where my brain goes.
We're
I know the
heading that
history
way.
of design, and I know it was it's
The arts
connected to politics.
Right, it is.
Where design went, where it
Right.
was coming from, where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're describing how natural they were into, that's what Art Nouveau came from. It was very nature driven, very
I think it went like Art Nouveau and then arts and crafts and then like Art Deco. Like it was like a kind of like maybe there was some overlap.
They were overlap because Art Nouveau was France's. Arts and crafts
style.
Was England, Britain, that other parts of Europe, and then what was the other? Did you say
Art Deco?
Art Deco is a little.
It was like 20s and 30s.
A little bit later. On the end.
Mm-hmm. This is a weird discussion, but Marnee and I, we live in a arts and crafts house built in 1911.
1911. That's why I put it together because I'm like, wait, our house is Craftsman, 1911. So yes, definitely the politics that were happening that you're describing was what birthed the inspiration to this kind of architecture and art and
so crazy
design.
How that affects our aesthetics. You know.
Oh, I loved.
It's so fascinating.
I loved the history of design, the history of furniture. I loved it because I love history and sociology and stuff what's happening with people, and I loved seeing. Oh my gosh, I didn't connect it till I took those classes. That our art, our design, our architecture, our interior design is all reflective of what's happening in our politics, in our societies.
I think everything is basically a projection of us.
Yes.
Everything is.
Yes.
We imbue everything with us.
Yes.
And I think that's fucking great.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the stuff's not great, but I mean, like, that ability that we have, and if we could get our shit together, it'd be fucking great.
We're not going to get our shit together.
We're not. Not all of us, no. There was really a conflagration of socio-economic, political, religious, and nationalistic forces that came together during this time. Germany, in particular, had an intense reaction to the industrialization and internationalization of society. So this was a time when things were getting real industrial, which meant, hey, we have this, and this country needs that, and we have this, and we'll give it, and so all of a sudden there's like, things become less local, they become less national, they become more international, and things are kind of turning into this modern era. This is modernism happening, and it fucking hit them like a goddamn ton of bricks, as it would everybody. The United German regions had been broken into separate kingdoms and countries, attempted to be reconstituted again, only to suffer the same fracturing, the end of the Second Reich. It left many Germans scattered throughout disparate countries under various rulers. This was particularly true in Austria, where many Germans were beginning to form and recruit for German nationalist parties with the stated goal of maintaining their language and culture. So, like, Germany had undergone this, in the Middle Ages, it was established as kind of the state, and then it was this United Kingdom, and then it had kind of lost more and broken up, and then tried to be, kind of reconstituted into a single state and reunified again, and then broken up again. And so there was kind of this tone in Germany of like this intense nationalism. And then when they broke up, like, there's Austria, which is a separate country, right? That isn't all Germans, but there are a lot of Germans living there. Yeah. And so they start forming these German nationalist parties there because they're like, we're not going to lose our culture and stuff. Bunch of white people, by the way, they're all like, if we think like racism is only about color or like, it's really not. It's wild. There is that level of it, but then there's this cultural, national kind of fucking shit. Yeah. We're just finding ways
to separate and divide,
differentiate.
Which is,
In July of 1884, the first German Theosophical Society is established. Blavatsky's teaching had an immediate influence on esoteric thought developing there. Ideas she presented as truth from all-knowing ascended consciousnesses would be picked up and fit into their own cultural and political environment. In other words, to keep things relevant, this virus is going to mutate, right? So we're going to have a whole new strain of Theosophy because they're going to bring it in and adapt it to this shit that they got going on, right? And so it's going to shift, but it's going to be the space material. So in in July of 1884, they established a Theosophical Society in Germany. And the way it goes is like this guy who was like big into like occultism and shit like that. He stumbles across Blavatsky's book, gets super stoked, goes to India and meets her. While he's in India, she says, "You stay here. I'm going to go to Germany, set up a this is a weird story. Set up a Theosophical Society." He's there. I think the way I understood it was he's there during that whole controversy around Emma cutting and all the like faking phenomenon and all that shit that they had going on. So he has to deal with that whole mess while Helena's on a fucking German vacation over there drinking beer and eating sausages. She didn't do any of that. They were vegetarians and didn't drink any of that shit. So they didn't get to enjoy Germany at all. And so, so she actually said, and then she comes back, and then he goes back, and he becomes like the president of the German theater. But anyway, early on in 1884, right? This is like fucking way before the Nazis, right? We're talking 50 years.
Our house in Kansas was built in like 1883, I think.
Yeah, it was 1883. Yeah, we actually lived in this little house. Holy shit.
I'm just like tying our homes, our old homes,
to the time.
to the times that we're talking about, so I can like mentally go like,
oh my God,
this is what the world looked like back then.
We lived in this little town in Kansas, like this little Mayberry fucking town. Had like one restaurant, and we had this house that was built in 1883. It was really cool. It came with this like.
It was our very first house.
It was our very first house that we bought. We were 23. We had 2 kids. We had our 3rd kid in that house.
Yes.
And then had to immediately vacate because I was out of the army. We needed someplace free to live.
We bought that house for $38,000.
$38,000 in 1993.
I remember our house payment was $325.
Yeah. Fucking crazy. And then there'd be like a storm. We'd have to go down the cellar. It was creepy as balls. This house was sitting on like limestone rocks stacked on top of each other. There's like handmade square nails holding like the beams together. It was pretty intense. But fun times. Anyway, of course, the Germans liked Theosophy too. It outright referred to the Teutonic race, mostly who lives still in Germany, Austria, and Northern Europe, as the best current representations of the savior race, the Aryans. Remember that? That's what you said.
Oh, yeah.
So, of course,
so they're like,
hey, man, here's the deal. If anyone ever tells you that a kind of people are the best or a place is the best, they are that kind of people or from that place, okay? Like, that's what they're like. The Germans are the best. We like Theosophy. Theosophy's down. I'm down with that. Fucking Jesus Christ. The ones that had committed the least amount of... So the Germans, these people, when Helena said they were the best representations of Aryan, the Aryan race, it was because they had committed the least amount of miscegenation. Right? So that was a word she used. Oh, I'm going to tell you. So this was a word coined about 20 years later 20 years earlier in 1863 in the good old US of A. Anyway, there was a pamphlet that was published, and the title was Miscegenation, the Theory of the Blending of Races, Applied to the American White Man and Negro. Awesome. It was a word invented by combining the Latin words miscere, meaning to mix, and genus, meaning kind. This pamphlet introduced this word in order to label marriage or sexual relations between whites and blacks as against nature, essentially.
Wait, who wrote this originally?
Some fucks. I didn't look into it. I know there's a whole hoax around it, like it was a hoax or something. But, I mean, this is like in the years... This is 1863. This is when our house is built. The fucking Civil War is happening like in a year or two.
Yeah, okay.
So, there's a lot of shit going on. Yeah, it's not great. They chose the word genus in an attempt to show that whites and blacks are distinctly different biologically, like 2 different kinds of animals, right? You were in science, remember genus and species. And genus is like the kind of animal.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's species which are variations, and some of them are very different variations and very distinct. But when you're a different genus, I mean, you're in a whole... Right.
And you can't even... Yeah, you can't mate with them.
Some species can mix in between species, but not different kinds of animals.
Genuses.
Not genuses.
That's what I'm saying. So if you're a different genus, then that's what their point is saying.
Despite the fantastic cartoon cat dog, a cat fucking a dog would not make an animal with a cat and a dog head. As much as I wish that was true. God, I love that. That's what I watch with my kids. My kids were in the 90s. They're all 90s kids.
Dog.
Fucking cat dog. Have a one day with a woof and a bird. Alone in the world is a little cat dog. I fucking love that shit. So anyway, this is stupid, of course, since we all, no matter how much melanin we produce or what our features look like or where we come from on this fucking rock, are Homo sapiens. Same genus, same species. When are we going to finally get over ourselves and accept that? Using a mix of Norse mythology, anti-industrialism, anti-Semitism, of course, and scientific musings on the extensions of Darwinian evolution. Remember, this was like new, so people are like, let's like think about this, and just went crazy. Prominent German voices arose, latching on to Helena Blavatsky's root race theories. Again, they're like, Germans are the best, I'm on board.
Yeah, let's
Tell
hear
me
about
more.
this. Tell me more. I want to know.
Two highly influential thinkers and German occultists were particularly involved in adapting theosophical doctrine into a form that appealed to Germanic supremacy, allowing others to further develop these ideas to justify Aryan breeding programs, hateful racial policies, and genocidal atrocities decades later. The first is a guy named Guido von List. His birth name was Guido Karl Anton List. He was a Libra. I don't know if that matters, but being born on October 5th, 1848 in Vienna, Austria. He added the aristocratic von to his name in 1903 after claiming he was actually descended from Austrian nobility. He claimed his great-grandfather had abandoned his title in order to run an inn. He apparently wanted to pursue his bliss and spark joy and said, fuck it, I don't need to be a big shot. So long as I am passionate about what I'm doing, I'm going to manage a Motel 6. That's kind of his story. Actually, this never happened, proven by all kinds of historical records, by the way. And the Von was part of his legend building that served a couple of purposes, which we'll see later. So his name's Guido von List in history. That's not his name. Von was an aristocratic. It meant you came from like royal lines. It was a title, right? It was like a sir, in the British kind of context. Yeah. And so, Von, when you see people with Von on their names, that's what that means. So Guido was kind of a multi-hyphenate. He was a journalist. He wrote plays and dramatic productions. He wrote novels and all kinds of books. And his true passion was a fascination with German occultism. And he probably sucked at digging a ditch. Okay, he was a nerd. This guy was a huge fucking nerd. In fact, this episode is kind of a cautionary tale of what happens when nerds are allowed to run wild and influence the masses. I'm talking about you, Mark Zuckerberg, you fucking dickhead. Look at our culture right now. Nerds are running shit. Our whole fucking reality is crafted and presented to us by fucking nerds. Watch when we go through this. These are nerds. These are people that were beaten up in school. I'm not supporting bullying. I'm just saying, like this. These are people who will... It's almost like they're taking Dungeons & Dragons, like, just fucking let's spin it into the real world, right? Yeah. And then they get influence and power, and fucking what? It gets crazy. So when Theosophy hit the scene, Guido was immediately taken with it, becoming highly, highly influenced by Blavatsky's teaching. This shit coming from the masters, or Mahatmas, or whoever, sounded cool with him. And he was Austrian, the land of the most pure Aryans. Of course, he latched onto it, right? I mean, like that's fucking. He's like, "What? I'm the best?
I like this teaching. Let's go for it."
So here's a quote from the Occult Roots of Nazism, one of the sources for this episode. Guido List was the first popular writer to combine Volkish ideology with occultism and theosophy. So remember, we have this like the social movement going on, kind of like the hippie movement of the 60s, which turns out, as I look more and more into this shit, was nothing new and nothing that spectacular.
No, I knew that, yeah.
I was just listening to a podcast, and the guy made the comment that the 1920s was a more radical, there were more cults, there were more fucking crazy shit going on in the 20s and the 60s.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know why that's even relevant. But at this time, there's all this shit going on, right? And he's the guy that takes this Volkish revolution, which is this kind of like, fuck Christianity, organized religion. They ruined our whole fucking thing. Industrialism's ruling. They kind of longed for this romantic medieval version of like time, like the days of yore.
Mm-hmm.
Nerds, right? People who go to Renaissance fairs. I love those people, but they're fucking nerds, right? That's these people. They're like that. They're very romantic. It's this very kind of like super into German mythology, Norse mythology. They were trying to bring that back in as kind of a cultural kind of rebuilding after Christianity came in and displaced all these pagan roots and stuff like that, which I fully support a lot of those things. But where they take it is fucking crazy. And unfortunately, it has a lot to do with fucking the shit that Helena provided them. And so he's the first guy to take Theosophy and these ideas of root races and start mashing them together with this German social movement going on. Okay?
Well, that's interesting because we're seeing, like, currently the fucking right-wing conspiracies mesh with the left spiritual hippie type people, which is what you're describing happened back in the 20s.
Yeah, just buckle up because you're gonna start going like,
What
when
the
was this?
fuck?
Was this last week?
What
was this
day
now?
are we in?
Yeah, no, there is so many parallels to what was going on in the lead up to this, which is why we need to be so serious about heading this off because I was taking breaks and going like, fuck. This is feeling really
Feels like
familiar,
current
and that's scary as shit because I really wasn't in that camp of like, let's compare this to that. So Wotan was.
And when we started this study, this actually wasn't. Like we said, we started this study months ago, and actually
over a year ago.
Oh yeah, and it
months ago. We can still say that days ago, for that matter, minutes ago. I mean, it just gets bigger.
But like the stuff didn't seem as relevant as like today. So it's
Seriously.
wild that we're here.
Seriously.
That we picked up this study.
I'm like, okay.
I can't remember what made you. Oh,
well,
you did her for your. That's right, for your.
Yeah, I
paper.
wrote a paper on her, and I was fascinated. I'm like, I got whatever. But I don't know. Maybe the masters arranged all this. I don't know.
The universe.
My masters are way different than hers. They say different things.
My masters.
Wotan was an ancient Germanic sky god. The Saxons adopted the god, calling him Woden. Remember, if you listen to the, I think it's the second Christmas episode, we talk about how Wednesday is Woden's day. And that was a god associated with the god and planet Mercury later in the Greco-Roman pantheon. And the Norse referred to them as Odin, right? So Woden was the Germanic version of the Norse god Odin, right? Wotan was the husband of Freya and popular mostly amongst the noble and upper classes. The more rural and peasant classes were super into Thor, the god of thunder.
Thursday and Friday.
Yeah. The more... Oh, I already said that. Germanic tribe... Oh, fuck, Jesus. In certain Germanic tribes, Wotan replaced the god Tiwaz. That's where we get Tuaz Day from. He was associated with god Mars. He was the god, the planet Mars, I should say, and the analog of the Greco-Roman god Mars. He was the god of war, but in some contexts in Germany, Wotan, Odin, same god, the sky god, kind of absorbed Tuaz and became, the god of war and victory also. Okay, so that kind of is happening at this time as well. Becoming associated with blood sacrifice, hanging, and ritual death. Right? There's a lot of myths around Odin, Wotan. We talked about him in fucking Santa Claus episode, Christmas episode 3. Remember, he was part of the source of how Santa got his magical powers. He could fly and see who's naughty or nice. That was Wotan, or Odin, right? And he's associated with all this kind of shit, right? And he became the huge central pagan focus of this recapturing of Germanic culture from Roman Christian influences that had invaded and kind of converted the early medieval German culture. For example, the Cimbri tribe, one of the Germanic tribes, which originated in northern Germany and Denmark, would raid nearby tribes and lands, raping and pillaging along the way. Behind the warriors followed carts full of women and children. Older women served as seer priestesses of Wotan. They had gray hair, wore pure white dresses, bronze body armor, covered in a flaxen cloak, fastened with decorative clasps. Like they're like fucking looking baller, right? They also carried swords. The men would hang the captives over large cauldrons, and the old women would slit their throats, speaking prophecies from Wotan based on impressions they received watching the splashing and swirling blood. At other times, the priestesses would open their guts to read the future in their entrails.
Yeah.
Yikes. Right, so, I mean, this is where the Germanic tribes were like, this is very pagan. The Celts, we believe, again, there's little known about them in reality, but seem to have similar traditions, and there seems to be some relationship there. So Wotan was like, intense.
Gore god.
Yeah, he's intense, right? So anyway, back to Wotan. There were a couple of cycles at the heart of Wotanism, right? This is what Guido von List was getting super into and what he was preaching. The first was a very Hindu-flavored version of reincarnation: birth, being, death, and rebirth. This cycle represented the primal law, signifying God's presence in nature. As part of this cycle, humans were seen as equally part of nature and subject to its laws. The laws of God as they saw them. As part of this harmony they were to strike with these laws, a close identity to one's people and race was seen as a logical requirement. Right? So they're like, again, adopting these Hindu ideas, not just them, but I mean, that leaked into Wotan from hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago as well, because there was these influences that just became different analogs in different cultures, right? Mm-hmm. And so he saw things as like, well, there's this cycle, and part of that cycle, the karma, you could say, that you need to strike, the balance you need to strike within that cycle, is identifying with your race. Again, pulling in these things. There was a lot of anti-Semitism going on at the time, right? In Germany, in Austria, already. Now they're being told, well, they're not technically Aryans. They're Aryans that came from Aryans that had sex with animals, essentially. They're not human. So there's this whole, just gross soup of ideas, and then Theosophy comes in and says, but you guys are the best Aryans, and then they start bringing this other shit in, right? And so the cycle of I need to be closely identified with my race, and so this insular, like when you hear people say America first, mm-hmm. like that kind of idea, mm-hmm. but in a very nationalistic, kind of even. Well, we have that too, white nationalism. It's basically what it's associated with. German nationalism is what they would say. Yeah. Guido's Wotanism also included a cycle of human evolutionary development, from unity to multiplicity and then back to unity again. This was framed in the thinking that pure Aryans had mixed with inferior beast-like races, leading to multiculturalism and a lack of Aryan purity. From this state of multiplicity, the Aryan race would once again move towards unity. Basically, let's just get rid of the bad ones so we can once again reunite the magical pure Aryan race and get our powers back. That was kind of the idea. These were cycles embedded in nature. Mm-hmm. And Wotan, this ancient Germanic god, is the representative that we need to bring back, and we need to do things the way that he would do things, right? It's pretty intense. Guido List believed that Christianity had destroyed true Germanic culture and had acted as a roadblock for the Aryan race to fulfill its cosmic destiny. Correct on that first point, but way off on that second one, right?
Yeah.
Did they destroy Germanic culture?
Yes.
Sure. Just like they did
every
all
other
kinds
culture.
of culture.
That they tried to...
Yeah. Did they interrupt their superior development along the... No.
No.
Jeez. He was super into Atlantis, Lemuria, and other mythical lost civilizations, tapping deep into Helena's image of these root races, even starting to identify ancient sites in Austria as likely being of Atlantean origin, right? So he's like, I'm like the superior race, and like all of a sudden it's like, well then that shit must be Atlantean. You know, like all of a sudden his neighborhood has Atlantean shit in it. You know, it's just fucking ludicrous. People just start identifying stuff that's like claiming it. It's just fucking crazy. Anyway, that's what's going on. This in 1902, Guido had to undergo cataract surgery. 1902.
What? They had cataract surgery back then?
So check. So my dad actually just had this done right before Christmas. Right. Hearing him describe this surgery made my balls go up inside of me. My dad is tough, like so tough. Nothing gets to him pain-wise.
Seriously.
But he said it doesn't hurt or anything. My mom's had it done. She said it doesn't hurt. She's tough too, though. I don't trust them. I'm way more sensitive
I don't think
than
it hurts.
Anyway, he said it didn't hurt.
No.
Right? My dad, after like 2 hours after the surgery, he couldn't wear his glasses anymore because his eyes were too good. Like he has to get new glasses.
Yeah.
He was fine.
Yeah.
Right? This motherfucker.
I need to get some cataract surgery.
Yeah. So poor old Guido spent pretty much a full year, most of it totally blind after this surgery.
Oh.
Just fucking laying in a hospital waiting for the
his
damage.
didn't go as well as your dad's.
No, I think that was just the nature of having cataract surgery. I don't know if anything went wrong. I never found anything that said like due to complications.
Yeah.
It was just like he had cataract surgery, which meant you're blind for a year and you're fucking just laying in bed in a hospital waiting to recover. Wow. Oh my God. I can't imagine a 1902 doctor just like, well, open your eye. I'm fucking, here comes a scalpel. Gives me the chills. This gave him a lot of time with his thoughts. Not great for a lot of people in history. He spent this time almost entirely in contemplation around the occult ideas he was formulating. So this gave him time to really flesh this shit out and go like, what if? He especially focused on his obsession with discovering the ancient Proto-Aryan language. Okay, remember we talked about how Aryans are like, it's really a language group more than an ethnic group.
Okay.
Now, ethnic groups, people groups did refer to themselves as Aryans, but it was because they spoke a language.
Yeah.
Which was called Indo-Iranian, what was it called? Indo-Aryan Iranian or whatever, right? And there is evidence of an Indo-European Aryan language. But it had nothing to do with these people in fucking Europe, right? But they thought like, well, if we tie ourselves to that, well, that ties us to an earlier form of the Aryan race that didn't get polluted by that miscegenation, mixing with people that aren't technically of our race. So we're not as polluted, right? So people start thinking like, how can we make this even better? Well, we got to cleanse this shit. You know what I'm saying? You see where things are going.
So bad.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. But anyway, he's in the hospital, blind, just fucking thinking. And he's a huge fucking nerd who just fantasizes about shit.
Yeah.
So, he came to conclude that this language, tying them to the true Aryans, were represented in the runes of ancient Germanic tribes and heraldic symbols used by ancient Teutonic ancestors. And so he starts formulating this whole mythological, very chivalric, again, at this time, this was the vibe. This is what people were into, was this kind of like romanticized idea of the fucking medieval chivalry and all these things that even today our movies project out of what they were seeing it as, which was not what it was like. But whatever, these concepts, though, he just fused into it his German nationalistic socioeconomic shit and this new Theosophy shit and this occultism that he had, and all this stuff he's gathering. And he's got 11 months with fucking his eyes closed, just coming up with this shit. And he's like, I'll bet you that this ancient secret language, remember Helena? We'll get into this. We're going to hear this a few times. She just laid the script. That's what I'm saying. Her influence is more than just what she said. It's how she did it. That people are going to go like, I can do that too.
Yeah.
And here's what they say.
Yeah.
And when people then do that, it's fucked up.
Yeah.
So after recovering, he wrote down. Oh, anyway, he tied this ancient language to runes. Have you heard of that? Have you ever seen runes?
Yeah.
Okay. we'll talk a little bit about this, but he said, well, the secret to our Aryan connection to these Hindus, which were the first subrace of the Aryan, the fifth savior race, the most spiritually, innocent and pure. And so he's like, the runes, that's what it is, right? And so after he's done, after recovering, he finally recovers. Fuck, a year, can you imagine? Fuck. He wrote down his conclusions. And he, the manuscript was full of theosophically derived evidence and ideas. It even included a prominent section on the importance of the swastika as the totemic emblem of the superior Aryan race, something he got straight from Helena. Remember, she said that was the symbol.
Yeah.
The swastika was identified by Helena as the magical symbol of the Aryans. There was a lot of speculation as to the origins and meanings behind this ancient symbol. Mm-hmm. Most believe it to be a solar symbol, possibly derived from the seasonal positions of a set of stars within the constellation Ursa Minor. Okay, so Ursa Major is the Big Dipper, and Ursa Minor is the Little Dipper. And the tip of the handle of the Little Dipper is the star Polaris, which we also talked about in one of the Christmas episodes, one or two. It's the star that our sky rotates around. Yeah. The pole star, Polaris. We also call it the North Star. If you've ever heard of the North Star, that's the same star. It makes the tip of Ursa Minor, this thing we call the Little Dipper. Because of that rotation, it's anchored at its handle. So seasonally, that thing's rotating around, right? And it's like a thing with a bulge on one, like on the end, right? And if you look at that from the standpoint of like equinoxes and solstices, that thing is positioned in the north, west, east, south positions. And if you put that all four of those together, that may be the origins of the swastika. I don't know if I explained that very well.
Yeah,
but if you take the Little Dipper and you put one and you leave it there and you rotate another one so that it's directly 90 degrees from it, like say you put one so that the Little Dipper is pointing at 12 o'clock, the ladle or whatever, and then you put one at 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock, it kind of makes this cross with these bent ends. And they thought maybe that was some solar representation of the year, of the trip of the sun, as represented by this set of stars and a constellation that they found prominent, they venerated for whatever reason, right? And so possibly, but no one really knows exactly where it came from. It's been used in various different religions. I mean, Hinduism, obviously, Buddhism, even forms of Christianity, and some more mystical kind of sects of various organized religions have used it. At the turn of the century and into World War I, it was in America, you could buy earrings that were swastikas. All this stuff before the Nazis got a hold of it. It was seen as kind of a good luck symbol, but it was because it was tied to black people weren't wearing swastikas. Jews weren't wearing swastikas. Yeah. Because it was a white thing, because and these ideas were permeating culture, and these ideas of Aryan race, and it was scientifically tinged, so it seemed like it made sense, and then this just fleshed it out. And so the swastika was big, and I think the swastika was big because of Helena. Yeah. No one would have fucking gave it. No one would have been like wearing swastikas from the East unless all of a sudden she said, well, it's the magical symbol of white people, you know. Pretty wild. So Guido submits his magnum opus to the Austrian Imperial Academy of Sciences for review. They declined to publish it and sent it back with no comments and likely a lot of eye roll and eggplant emojis. Okay, so they get it, and they're just like, oh, whatever, dude. You're a fucking wacko. And they send it back just like nothing, not even a thank you. They're just like, oh, have it back. Return to sender. We're not interested. We're talking about science here. During his convalescence, according to him, he also developed supernatural insight. Holy shit.
Of course.
Beyond human powers that not only allowed him to magically read the runes, which, by the way, people are still trying to really figure out. Okay, people who are serious Germanic scholars, there are runologists, there are real disciplines around trying to figure out these ancient symbols. It's a very different language. It seems to have its roots possibly from the Phoenicians, and maybe came up the Mediterranean. I mean, there's some crazy, interesting things. Yeah.
Phoenicians.
Well, everything came. I mean, maybe multiple origin points, but a lot of things start somewhere and then
Mm-hmm.
spread, and they change, but there's still that root, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of discussion around runes, and people absolutely do understand what they mean now. They do not at all mean what the fucking Nazis or fucking Guido von List or whatever said. But he says the reason why he was able to translate the runes, this secret language, right, that's lost in time, just
Mm-hmm.
like, what the fuck? Sindar, right? Just like Helena's secret language. Remember when she like saw that this book of whatever the fuck it was called? All of a sudden he has magical insight.
Yeah.
And he's able to see and magically read this ancient language, and so he's going to tell you what it says, kind of thing. And he also says that he's able to telepathically communicate into the past with a group of ancient ruling Teutonic Aryan priests he called the Armanen. He's like, guess what? These masters, my masters, German Teutonic priests from the past who have ascended into, universal consciousness and know everything, they're talking to me now. It's like, fucking Jesus. We can see what's happening here. He took Helena's teachings, remixed it for a different audience, and then pumped this new shit out. Now was Guido playing the role of special person who could read an ancient, unknown language and who was getting universal wisdom from ascended consciousness from the past, right? This is also when he added the von to his name, claiming noble lineage. This served a couple of purposes. First off, other esoteric figures in Germany at this time were doing this to give themselves an aristocratic edge. So he had to keep up and remain competitive, right? if other voices that are saying the shit you're saying and different takes or whatever in your kind of industry are starting to put Vaughn on their shit, you got to
add the Vaughn.
Yeah, fuck yeah. But more importantly, it served to tie him to the Armanen, right? These noble priests of his ancient Aryan Teutonic past that are magically talking to him. It gave his words and self-proclaimed magical insight the credibility he needed for people to believe he knew something. The bullshit being woven at this time from a variety of figures in Germany and Northern Europe became known as Theosophy, the study of the Aryan race. This was like science they were thinking they were establishing. List branded his version of Ariosophic thought as Armanism after the priest he supposedly talked to through time with his mind. Okay, so the Armanen that he, dubbed his Armanism is what he called his Ariosophy, right? His writings made heavy use of quotations by and references to prominent theosophical sources, writers, and leaders, including many allusions to Helena herself, quoting her word by word frequently. In 1908, Guido starts the List Society as a formal organization to teach and practice his occult ideas and philosophies. The inner circle of the organization was known as the HAO, which stood for the High Armanen Order. Remember the Blavatsky Lodge, which was the inner circle of the real Theosophists, right? Same thing, right? So he's got the List Society, and then within the List Society, he's got the real fucking shit, just like Helena did.
Yeah,
so you can
yeah.
see, and she didn't come, this is like cultic manipulation 101.
Yeah.
You get a following, and then you bring some into the inner circle, which puts some on the outside, which has them always working to get into the inner circle. Why the inner circle is so privileged to be there, they'll do whatever you fucking say to stay there. Dude, as a pastor in the church, oh my God, that happened. You watch that happen, right? People trying to get in that inner circle, people trying to stay in there. Fucking. Anyway, that's what they're doing. He gathered followers and continued to develop his ideas about Aryan racial supremacy and a return to ancient Germanic beliefs and lifestyles. After World War I broke out, Guido preached that he had received a vision that the mighty Aryans of Germany and Austria would be victorious and usher in a united return to the Aryan roots and mission, the further evolution of the human race. He was wrong, right? World War I did not go well for Germany. They ended up in this was when shit broke apart again. This attempt to reunify underneath the Kaiser, and then he fucking got his ass beat. And then internationalism came in and said, you know what? We can't trust you guys anymore. You guys keep trying to fucking assemble and take over everywhere and claim it as yours. So next thing you know, the Weimar Republic and these governments that were set up in post-German World War I Germany, leadership which included Jews and other people, not just Jews, but I mean they were in there. They had a voice. They were representative. They were part of kind of the elite part of society, and so you can see these divides becoming even further. Like, we're supposed to be this united Aryan getting rid of all these dogs, and now they're in charge of us.
Mm-hmm. Oh, God.
Okay? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. That's some social media. That's right. I don't know what to say other than like this is what was going on, right?
So people say a lot, the division in our country started with Obama. And I want to say, yeah, because you hated having a black man as your leader.
Yeah.
You started the division with your hate and your rage that a black man was in charge. Mm-hmm. It did start there. Like the modern, current crazy that we're in.
Resurgence, let's say.
The resurgence of it.
Yeah.
And it was them, the hate that raged against having a black man as their leader, and that started the division.
Yeah.
So that what you just said reminds me of that beginning there. Like they're mad that
how dare this person take this position over me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, here's what's crazy is we were just having a conversation with a friend recently, and I really do believe, so in the 90s, our absolute understanding, the FBI, intelligence, white national domestic terrorism was the biggest threat to our country. We knew that. Oklahoma City, fucking other shit that they broke up. Things like, the assassination of a Jewish radio host by people play acting out a book that they read, and just crazy shit was going on in the 90s. And then fucking 9/11 happened. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, all our resources went towards these brown people that are coming to kill us. Mm-hmm. And all of those white nationalists did not go away. Yeah. They did not switch allegiance. They continued. In fact, they were able to dive underneath the radar. They were no longer being looked at.
Well, and it fed.
It never.
Even having the enemy be the brown person fed what was already.
I truly believe on September 12th, 2001, white nationalist terrorism was still the biggest threat to our country. Yes. But we were so fucking distracted and so whipped up into all this stuff that we've headed off and allowed them to where when all it took was someone to say it's okay to be who you are. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they did not become what they were at that moment. They finally felt free to say this and do these things.
And I think that they radicalized more people in it.
Oh, fuck yeah.
I think that was
totally
under the surface.
Totally.
But the amount that is now has been radicalized the same way.
Yes.
The other terrorists.
And radicalized in such a broader landscape of our population. Yeah, if you were in prison or a fucking biker or some shit, you were probably a fucking neo-Nazi or white nationalist. Now it's like, when you watch the video of these people that are desecrating our form of government and what we stand for, they look like fucking moms and aunts. They don't look. They're not skinheads. It was terrible. Anyway, we need to get back to this. He was wrong, of course, about the vision that Germany was going to be, usher in this new Aryan age by destroying everyone in World War I. And he winds up depending on the kindness of his followers and friends to endure the food shortages as Germany's hopes of victory and unification were dashed. His health continued to decline, and on May 17th, 1919, Guido von List died. Everyone look up a picture of this guy. He looks like a miniature, nerdy version of the Monopoly Man. You just want to fucking punch him in his face. Anyway, along with List, another figure who would have significant influence on the theosophical development in Germany was a piece of shit named Georg Lanz von Lebensfels. We'll get to that. He was kind of like a little fanboy for List, but would take his fun brand of anti-Semitism even further. Of course, since these are really just nerds LARPing out fantasies, that was not his given name either. He was born Adolf Josef Lanz on July 19th, 1874, giving cancers a very bad name. Day before my birthday. Fuck you. Who gives a shit about his early years, so we'll just skip to the relevant parts. He joins the Cistercian Order of the Roman Catholic Church in 1893. It was at this time that he adopted the name George, or Jorg, to them in German. While a monk in the order, he came under the sway of a mentor. He was an old priest by the name of Nivard Skogel. Infamous for his raging anti-Semitism, he influenced the worldview of young Jorg. The old priest was such an anti-Semite that the very church he worked for and represented had placed his translations of the Bibles and other of his writings on the list of forbidden books. Why you can still be a supposed minister of Jesus Christ when your books are so hateful the church you are ordained by says people shouldn't even see them is beyond me. But they let this guy stick around, and this guy was a fucking monster.
What, they're like, he's still a priest, but don't read his books.
Right, and he's shaping Jorg's mind as a young priest. And I'm just like, they're like, hey, no one allow anyone to see this shit. It's so hateful.
No one should read
but
what he writes.
Let him still minister to
this
people.
Guy.
What? Anyway,
so
I mean, we had pedophiles that were essentially anyway. It's just whatever. Lack of consistency, let's just say. A year after joining the order in 1894, Jorg started telling people an incredible story. Apparently, he was out for a walk contemplating the wondrous creation of God all around him. Well, everything but the Jews, of course. When he somehow stumbled across what he determined was a tombstone of a Templar knight. Again, this is like so romantic. Like, oh my God. The Templars and other medieval legends were huge at this time, especially lore around the Holy Grail due to Wagner's operas pushing it into popular German culture. So Wagner's operas, and it was huge, just dredging up this kind of cartoonish version of Germanic mythology into this really stunning and moving opera, but it also viewed a lot of like Adolf was Hitler was super into it. This is where we get Vikings wore horns on their helmets, came from Wagner's opera. You know the Bugs Bunny. Okay, so that's Wagner. That's what is it? The Cry of the Valkyries or whatever. Okay, so that's Wagner. That's how we know it. Is Porky Pig and fucking Bugs Bunny.
Okay.
Who killed the rabbit? Who killed the rabbit? Anyway, that's Wagner. And so he brought this, again, this romantic view of these knights and, King Arthur and the Round Table, and the Templar Knights were especially, like a really popular thing. Okay, so, and this was a convenient tale too, since the Cistercians were actually the first order placed in authority over the actual Temple Knights, the knight that who would become the Knights Templar when they first organized. The Pope actually put the Cistercian order over them as like kind of that's who they reported to. Uh-huh. So there was this tie also. So like, well, of course the Templars would get involved with this dude because he's fucking, a Cistercian monk. He had that historical tie that gave his story some credence. Here at this magical spot, seemingly chosen and led to this portal, he claimed to have received enlightenment, communicating with ascended Aryan consciousnesses from the past. Wild. All of these ascended ancestors are getting real chatty all of a sudden. It is at this time he also began telling a different origin story for himself. You gotta read, you gotta I'm a hero, so you gotta fucking get your shit together. Now he was telling gullible people that he was born May 1st, 1872, as the son of Baron Johann Lanz de
denied his
Liebenfels.
crabby cancerousness?
Yeah, fuck you. However,
tried to become a Taurus?
Yeah, come on. I mean, whatever, but still. However, historical records demonstrate he was born to Johann, a schoolmaster, and his wife, Katerina. So this guy just no, I was born to a baron, So I'm Jorg von Liebenfels now. Armed with a messianic complex and spurred on by morons willing to believe him,
everyone.
He developed his Theosophic ideas, eventually publishing his theories in a book he called Theozoology. Okay, get ready. In his racist tome, he introduced such familiar terms as God-mention. Okay, so you haven't read as many books about the Nazis or anything or watched as many things. So God-mention was the God-men. This is who they were trying to breed, right? Okay. This pure Aryan blood that would recapture. Our pineal glands will move back as a third eye and we'll have, all this shit that Helena was talking about, where we came from, that we lost because we fucking fucked animals, right? And sub-races. Subhuman races. And so God mention he brings up, and so the whole concept of the Nazi ideology later that would talk about this and promote this came from this motherfucker's book called Theosophy, which is a combination of the Greek words for God, theo, and zoology, which is like looking at God's animals or how God created the nature kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. From, again, reading from The Occult Roots of Nazism, quote, according to his theology, the fall simply denoted the racial compromise of the Aryans due to wicked interbreeding with lower animal species. The consequences of these persistent sins, later institutionalized as satanic cults, I'm like, okay, wow, was the creation of several mixed races, which threatened the proper and sacred authority of the Aryans throughout the world, especially in Germany, where this race was most numerous. And so what he's saying is the Bible, the fall, Adam and Eve falling, it wasn't, all of that was just a story that was saying that they started fucking the wrong, they fucked outside of the race, basically, is how they created all these problems. That's what caused God to be mad. And notice how it says later institutionalized as satanic cults. Do you see how this mythology is then just brought into this like context that fits the overarching spirituality of the time? So you tell people in America that there's a satanic cult of people doing these things.
Mm-hmm.
They're all praying for that because they're all fucking Christians and going to church and doing all this shit, and they think Satan's real.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, well, that's a thing I think is real, so that must be true.
Yeah.
If you said, oh, they're all cults of Shiva where they worship, they'd be like, that's fake, whatever. It's like, what the fuck? They were doing the same thing back then. Mm-hmm. They're like, no, Adam and Eve fell because they didn't keep the Aryan race pure. And, and later on, that whole impurity and those practices and things institutionalized into the Satanism that we see acting today or whatever. It's fucking crazy. His explanation of the Eden story was that Eve was perfect and didn't have any flaws, but then fucked up and went and had sex with a demon, creating less than human lower races, which mostly just meant the Jews. Sounds like this dude got cheated on or something. Seems personal, right? It's like this perfect girl, and then she went and fucked another person. Fuck her. The whole human race is damned because of her. You're like, oh, easy, Jorg. He wove these fantasies, rewriting understanding around the past and the Bible. His claims were that for the vast majority of antiquity, our one main obsession was the breeding and rearing of what he called Bullsverge, something like that. I don't know German. Bullsverge, which were essentially love pygmies used as sex toys. He said that, like going on throughout the Bible times and most of history, we were trying to breed these little people that we could fuck all the time.
Oh my God. What? Oh my God.
Hey, this is what was going on. I'm just saying. In fact, he claimed that the thrust of the Old Testament was a warning to the pure Aryans to not mix with these subhumans. He taught these ideas to demonstrate the Jews were a threat to Aryan supremacy because of the position they had been allowed to assume in society. Jewish communities were thriving and held quite a bit of economic and even political influence. It was the same shit we hear today about how they are stealing our jobs or those people are taking over. Same instinct, just dripping with intense hatred for the Jewish people pumped into him by his old mentor, right? According to this fuckhead, what we called the gods in the past were earlier and superior forms of life. Interstellar beings he referred to as Theozoa, god animals, literally, right? They had created the god men, the god mentioned, he called them, which were Adam and Eve, right? They were the god men. Like Eve, Adam is called out for creating a lower race of beast men, which Liebenfels called anthropozoa. I guess you could say the best way I would translate that is like manimals, like part man, part animal. Stupid, true, but he was just stealing from some of the nonsense being thrown around in the scientific arena. For example, a zoologist named William Bolsch, who, tossing his bullshit into the ring, theorized that a race of inferior beast men were the origins of current mankind. These beasts were created through miscegenation, right? The fun word from earlier.
Bolsh was part of a free-thinking movement called monism that was popular at the time amongst elite pricks who got paid to sit and jack themselves off with their own amazing thoughts. These guys just sat around. They were rich fucks. They didn't have to do anything. They sat around and just thought about how wonderful their thoughts were, and it was all nonsense. Monism was the idea that mankind has taken our position due to the relentless struggle for survival of the superior versus the inferior, right? The Darwinian kind of survival of the fittest coming in, that they're bringing into like the human experience of how did we superior Aryans get here? It reduced life down to this struggle, allowing for some pretty fucked up ideas to emerge. For instance, Bolsh was also a member of the Society for Racial Hygiene, right? So this guy's a fucking prick. But he influenced Liebenfels, Jorg, extensively. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think he was the guy that told him that the pineal gland... I think I say this in here. Never mind.
Pineal?
Whatever. He suggested to Liebenfels that our earlier ancestors had more of the supernatural powers that Adam and Eve had, right? They were the God men. They had all these powers. But then they fucked up and had sex with animals, and then we lost them. He hinted that maybe we had a third eye, a real one, with magical insight that receded over time as we hooked up with people who weren't pure. There is direct evidence that Bolsh himself had taken this directly from Helena Blavatsky. So she made shit up, and then he throws it out as scientific theorizing, which makes it sound acceptable and reasonable to Liebenfels, who weaves this mythology around it, claiming it is further confirmation of theosophical truths around human development. Okay, so Jesus Christ. That's how things happen, people. Someone makes something up, and then someone confirms it just by quoting them and then saying, well, it's coming from this perspective, and people are like, it's true, and, wow. An interesting topic to talk about here are some very impacting discoveries and innovations that had taken the world by storm, and they had bewildered, even frightened people at this time. This was a world just being introduced to electricity, radiation, and radio transmissions. This was fucking all hitting them at once. What seemed like magical powers were being demonstrated to hypnotize audiences, not able to believe their eyes. The result is you have a world primed to believe whatever the fuck you have to say. Liebenfeld's story included the idea that the early, more pure Aryan ancestors could transmit thoughts and communications to each other through their third eyes using electricity and radio signals. People were like, okay, I'm not shocked by anything
Because
anymore.
I don't understand. Right, because the electricity and radio signals are all new. I don't know what that is. It must be magic.
It's so fucking great. He just like pulls from what's happening, just like all, no, electricity, that's just something we just discovered. But the gods, you said that's how they talk to each other. Man. And people are like, oh, bring it, dude. Yeah. I'm ready. Never fear, though, Liebenfels would go on to prescribe a remedy to this situation. It turns out, if you just continue the struggle, waging a war against the inferior, we can breed all these telepathic and omniscient abilities back into the race again. We just have to get rid of the beastmen. He would go on to promote policies of forced castration and sterilization of Jews and others deemed impure. Yeah, this isn't like fucking 1903. Mm-hmm. This is not Nazi Germany. Yeah. This is what I'm saying is Nazism was not some fresh idea. Yeah. This was an evolution of shit that happened that started with Helena. Yeah. And, sucks. By 1905, Liebenfels established the magazine Ostara, which included contributions from prominent theosophical figures regarding root race theory, given by the masters to Helena, confirming the tie of the Germanic peoples to the Aryan race. One avid reader actually sought Liebenfels out personally to get some back issues to complete his 50-copy set. Okay, he's got his magazine set, and he's like, I'm missing some issues, man. I got to get them. That guy was a young World War I veteran named Adolf Hitler. Fucking nerds, okay? Other prominent Nazi influencers were subscribers as well, and Ostara had a measurable impact on esoteric development in the early 20th century in Germany.
I feel like you're demonizing nerds a little too much.
I'm just saying, we have nerds running shit now, and it's not going well either.
Right, but you can't send the whole group into...
I'm saying nerds are great when they are doing things that don't involve them holding sway over people. Yes, I do think that. I do. I don't know.
You're being. I don't know.
Okay, I could be
you're
being mean because I've been reading all this and I'm watching these guys acting out these like fucking like Dungeons and Dragons scenarios, and it's very frustrating. And then I go, wait, Facebook and all these motherfuckers. Sorry.
I know that
Nerds, I love you.
I get that you're patterning,
I
you're making connections, but you don't need to vilify the whole group.
I love nerd culture. I think you're great. I'm just saying these weren't great nerds, okay?
That's all you
But they
gotta
were
say.
nerds,
You
and
can't-
that definitely informed how they viewed the world and
Yes.
where they took it. That's all I'm saying. Okay. So he also supported his fellow Ariosophist Guido von List, signing the founding charter as a supporter when the List Society was established in 1908. A year earlier, in 1907, Liebenfels had started his own esoteric organization he called Ordo Novi Templi, meaning Order of the New Templars. Okay, nerd. Fucking nerd. Right? But it sounds awesome. If they would have just done like, hey, we're having a performance. We're going to act out these like things. It'd been like fucking cool. But they're like, we're going to take over and cleanse the master race. Not cool, right?
Yeah.
Bad nerds.
Yeah.
So he of course he finds he even though he signed the List Society founding charter and he was super a fan of List. List was older than him. He kind of saw him a little bit as a, not a mentor necessarily, but like someone who he was like following in his footsteps a little bit. And then, but he also has his own thing going, which is like the new Templar Knights, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, on December 25th, Christmas 1907, above the order's headquarters at Werfenstein Castle, Liebenfels ceremonially raised a yellow flag adorned with a swastika and 4 fleur-de-lis. This was the first time an Ariosophic organization used the swastika to symbolize the superior Aryan race. Okay. Now, they got it from Helena. Mm-hmm. This is the first time in Germany that a bunch of people that are talking about Ariosophy, and he's the first guy to like go and raise a flag that has a swastika on it. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't look like the Nazi swastika. It wasn't a red flag. It wasn't this straight. It was curved. The swastika came in a lot of forms: counterclockwise, clockwise, curved, straight. There was all kinds of ways to represent it. But he is the first one to kind of officially tie that to it, right? He combined ideas of piety and chivalry with contemporary ideas of racism, elitism, and pan-Germanism. These he applied to a heroic Aryan view of the Knights Templar, which were closely associated with the order he once belonged to. He wove new tales of how the Templars were actually defending the purity of the Aryans and how their downfall was due to the conspiring of inferior races, right? So he's like, the actual mission of the Templars was to purify and ensure the developmental, furtherance of the Aryan race. But then all the Jews and all the inferior races conspired against them and stopped them from doing that, right? Kind of like they were going to make America great again, but then all these evil people came and stopped him from doing it. And so, same thing. Historically, the order was dissolved after accusations of occult practices. However, it probably had more to do with how much money the Templars had amassed and how much debt was owed to them by various rulers and leaders who supported the Crusades. And so, the Templars started off as this kind of like version of what became also known as the Hospitallers, which were the people that cared for the pilgrims and the people fighting the Crusades. Mm-hmm. And so the early roots of the Templar order, they took a vow of poverty, chastity, all that shit, right? Mm-hmm. And these were all people of noble birth. They weren't peasants. These were knights, right? These were the elite. But then they kind of are part of the very beginnings of our banking system, the Knights Templar, actually. Mm-hmm. They started holding the money for people that were going over to the Holy Land to crusade or pilgrimage or whatever. Mm-hmm. They started giving out loans. They started doing a lot of things that began to form things that would later come together during the Renaissance and kind of pre-Renaissance period that would formalize banking more. Mm. But they were kind of the early roots of it, and they got fucking rich.
Yeah.
And a lot of people owed them a lot of money, including whole kingdoms. Like kings had drawn loans from them for huge sums of money to take part in this holy crusade.
Yeah.
And so charges of devil worship and occultism were brought against them. They were dissolved. These guys were tortured brutally until they confessed, which leads me to believe that they likely didn't have anything. They were accused of worshiping Baphomet, a statue right there.
Yeah.
There's some confusion here. Some people think that it actually was Mahomet, what they were talking about, and they were being accused of worshiping Muhammad, essentially, the Muslim god. So there's all kinds of lore and mythology around the Knights Templar, but it seems like some powerful people owed them a bunch of money, and the best way to get rid of that is just fucking get rid of them, and the best way to get rid of them is just say you worship Satan, and you gotta go. And then we're gonna torture you until you say you did. The few people who did not confess were burned at the stake, still claiming their innocence. So I have to believe that they're probably we're getting fucked. Anyway, Liebenfels simply revised the history of the Templars so that he could act out his nerd fantasies in an organization he claimed was a revival of the true Templar mission to purify the Aryan race, started way back in the 12th century. Theosophical teachings would spread like wildfire across Europe, and especially in Germany, where they could lay claim to being the purest form of the savior race of Aryans according to Helena's writings. These ideas would be taken up, Germanized, and used to fuel hatred and genocide, all under the banner of just doing what the masters, or Teutonic priests, or Templar knights, or magical space gods wanted. While Hitler was certainly inspired and interested in the occult, evidence around how much he actually factored it into his ideologies are debated. There are tons and tons of documentaries, books, and articles about Nazi occultism. However, the details around Hitler's actual involvement are somewhat vague. He certainly was surrounded by people such as Heinrich Himmler, who were true believers practicing occult rituals with the intention of communicating with ancient Aryan consciousnesses, just like Helena. Himmler even believed himself to be the reincarnation of a 10th century king named Henry the Fowler. So there is a lot of speculation on how into the occult Hitler was. I don't actually believe he was into the occult at all.
Why?
Well, okay. His library, when they examined it, definitely had occult books. It seemed to be more of a scholastic interest.
Yeah.
So there's a weird thing that happens that we're going to talk about in Nazi Germany around occultism. What it seems to me, and again, just tying it to the current, he knew these people were believing this bullshit, and so he fucking rode that wave. He fed it. He used their terms. He played to it.
Yeah.
He manipulated them through this language, through these ideas, to get power.
Yeah.
Because that's what he wanted.
That's what he wanted.
And it worked.
Yeah.
But then, as we're going to see, as it goes along, things start falling apart, and you can't
what
have people saying magical
crazy
shit
leader
because
does is they take an ideology, spiritualism,
right,
Christianity, whatever it is, they take that and manipulate it to gain power.
Right. Now, and while I don't really believe that Hitler was all that into the occult, he probably was a little bit, because everyone's kind of a little bit into it. And he certainly had books in his library with notes in them and stuff that's, were around, but it was very kind of more historical, magic and stuff, and not so much like how to take over the world magic or whatever. He did surround himself with people who were true occultic believers, practitioners. Like I said, Heinrich Himmler. So he established the SS, which is the elite. They were the ones that you had to be selected as the purest, best version of an Aryan.
So how is it that Nazism seems attached to Christianity now when it was more attached to occultism back then?
Well, that's because of some developments in Judeo-Christianity that occurred that began to go, the lost tribes of Israel, it's the white people, right? So there's There's one called British Israelism. There's, here in the United States, I guess you would call it it's essentially dominionist theology, which essentially says we lay claim to the birthright that was given the Jews because they forfeited it by that. And so we're the real ones.
Yeah.
And so, yes, that happened later. Christians in Nazi Germany both went with Hitler and that kind of cultural movement and against it. There were Christian leaders who went to concentration camps, and there were Christian leaders who fucking served the Reich. Right? It was all over the place.
It wasn't in any ideology.
No.
And
but he was playing upon the very magical thinking that was happening
which
at
is
the
what
time.
you're seeing. It's like
That's what I'm saying.
Christians and spiritualists currently went with this crazy conspiracies, Trumpism stuff currently, and people are like, it. I feel like it just this year really. There was actually, the former founder, she's not the former founder, the founder of Buddha Yoga, like she was actually into it before all the other yoga people got into it. So like this year they're like, oh my gosh, all it's in the yoga community, but she was actually a Trumper before. So it already was seeping in.
Yeah. Right. And my point is like, Trump did not believe a single thing that was being said, but he's like,
but he's surrounded by people who
these motherfuckers will vote for me. Like, I'll play to this. Yeah. It seems more like Hitler saw usefulness to these ideas, a way to use the theosophical furor over Germany's Aryan supremacy to build support and seize total power. It totally worked. Once in power, Hitler imprisoned occultists, even sending them to concentration camps. Once he was in power, because of all the wackos buying and selling the story of Aryan supremacy, you don't want them to keep talking with ascended masters. You know it was all bullshit, and so you certainly don't want them turning on you and start saying some other bullshit that can hurt you. So you're like going, yeah, these people are talking to magic people and they're saying we're the best. But once you're in power, you can't have people having a higher authority than you, right? So he actually cracked down hard on occultists, right? When he really got into power and became the dictator, the Führer, right? Even when Hitler did allow someone to stick around, like in the case of astrologer Karl Kraft, it eventually came down to securing his own power and not some understanding from beyond. After first being arrested in the Nazi roundup of faith healers, occultists, and astrologers, Kraft convinced the Gestapo, that was like the secret police, that his predictions were correct and wound up being released and employed by the Reich, doing astrological research around political moves and war plans for the propaganda ministry and the SS. And so he was taken into custody in this roundup of occultists and astrologers and all this stuff. But while I was there, he's all making predictions and talking to the guards and stuff like that. And he says, hey, the Führer's his life is going to be endangered in the next couple days. And sure enough, this place, this beer hall he's at is fucking bombed, and he just gets out of there before he fucking gets blown up by a bomb. And so they're like, holy shit, this guy's tapped into something. And so they let him out, give a good word. Heinrich Himmler, leader of the SS, super into the occult and astrology. Again, he thinks he's the reincarnation of an ancient German king, right, from like the 9th century. And so, the things are pretty wacky. And so he winds up in an official position where he's like doing astrological readings, saying like, no, don't do that because the stars aren't right or whatever, Though most occultists had been jailed or banned, Kraft enjoyed prominence with the Nazis, even giving a personal horoscope reading to Adolf Hitler himself through one of his aides in 1940. So this guy like made it close to the top. Surely Hitler will be as loyal to him as he was to Hitler, right?
Mike Pence can tell you about that.
Yeah, exactly. In 1941, Rudolf Hess, the deputy Führer, and most prominent occultist in the central leadership, stole a plane and flew it to Scotland, hoping to strike a peace deal with Britain through channels he thought were against Churchill and against the war effort. So he had come to ideas through his occultic beliefs and astrology and through all this stuff that this was a doomed thing, that that Hitler was basically a fool and he was taking us to ruin, and we need to save this. And so he fucking writes a letter to this. He's by the way an aviator. Rudolf Hess is. He's like a war pilot from World War I when planes were first used. Holy shit.
Yeah.
And he writes a fellow pilot who he mistakenly thinks is like down with the anti-war movement. He totally wasn't. His name is the Duke of Hamilton. But MI5 seizes the letter that he writes, right? So Rudolf Hess tells his wife, I'm writing a letter to this dude, and then he's going to send back a letter saying, yeah, let's meet, and I'm going to fucking steal a plane, and I'm going to fly to Scotland, and we're gonna fucking end this shit because we're headed to ruin, right? And again, he's very occultic. He's reading he obviously it's just his assessment of the situation, but he's layering it with all this occultic stuff. Anyway, so no letter comes back because MI5, in fact, the Duke of Hamilton didn't even fucking see it for months, right? When they finally showed it to him. But Rudolf Hess says, fuck it, I'm going anyway. So he steals a plane, right? And he fucking flies. He flies to Scotland, but he runs out of fucking fuel, right? And so he ends up having to parachute out. And it's not sure whether he hurt his foot somehow, whether it was hitting the ground or whether it was getting out of the plane when he ejected or whatever. But he got hurt, and he hits the ground, and he can't really run away or anything, and he gets immediately captured, like just fucking right away, right? Because of Hess's occult ties and pull, Hitler set about brutalizing the community of occultists and astrologers and all these spiritual people in retaliation, trying to quell anyone who had any other magical ideas they wanted to try, right? This included the loyal Kraft, arrested in June of 1941, held in disgusting and inhuman conditions until he was to be transported to the Buchenwald concentration camp. While being transported, he came down with typhus and died on January 8th, 1945, on his birthday. Though it's pretty morbid, this Nazi astrologer got off easy, never making it to this hellish destination. Hess would die in prison, hanging himself in 1987 at the age of 93, which was way, 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 way overdue, if you ask me. These guys were fucking Nazi, racist assholes. But you can see the lunacy that's going on, fueled by belief that was set in motion by this theosophical principles that Helena put out there. When Hitler took power and then annexed Austria as part of Germany, Liebenfels actually thought Hitler would become one of his patrons. Instead, Hitler cracked down on occultists again and banned the publishing of Liebenfels' writing, even banning Ostara magazine. Remember the one that Hitler said? He's like, nope, can't have that anymore too. It was really weird to watch when that happened, and when Hitler, I think, saw, oh shit, if I have a bunch of people saying that they're connected to these supernatural forces and hearing from beyond, I'm going to have problems. Everything changed. Up until that point, any Nazi propaganda, all this shit was in fonts that were like Gothic. They looked medieval. It harkened to this mythological, chivalric, romantic idea of ancient Germanic tribes. After this happened, he outlawed the use of those fonts, and everything was then put into this Roman font that looked official, rational, like papers from the state and not from some esoteric organization. From it was just interesting to watch that happen, and I just feel like I'm so glad we didn't have to ever get there with Donald Trump, but that would have eventually happened. Yeah. Things would have got ahead of him. These things he was playing with and toying with and fucking, kind of throwing bait out to were going to get real dangerous. I mean, they almost got fucking irretrievably dangerous. So it's wild to me how we can get our minds around how narcissists and sociopaths, while they demand our loyalty, do not give a shit about us. Yeah. Donald Trump does not care one iota for any of those people that claim they were revolting for him. They all think surely he will reward me and make everything better for us after we show him how committed and loyal we are. He doesn't give a fuck about you. Just what you can do for him until he doesn't need you. anymore. I thought it was hilarious watching these videos and these guys taking pictures of documents in the floor of the Senate, and a guy says, no, Ted Cruz would like this if we're doing this. He would approve of this. Ted Cruz watched that video and said, you shut your fucking mouth and keep my name out of your mouth.
Yeah.
Because he's not going down with these motherfuckers.
Yeah.
He wants them doing what they're doing
Yeah.
because it fuels what he wants,
Yeah.
but he has no use for those
Never
people
back down.
beyond that.
Yeah.
And he's like, I fucking no, shut up. You know, to guarantee you that he was not jazzed on that whole thing. As we have seen, Theosophy provided material that was adapted and evolved, leading to drastic impacts on humanity as people play-acted out Helena's fantasies. There are a lot of defenders out there that say her theories were twisted and warped and that you can't really tie the Nazis to her teachings. However, the people who influenced the Nazis didn't really have to twist it all that much to justify extreme violence against who they perceived as lower races. Their Ariosophic literature was full of quotes and articles by major theosophical figures in India and across Europe, including Helena herself. Her intentions don't matter. She made up a bunch of shit that was clearly dangerous in the wrong hands, claiming it was from divine sources, thus completely and unquestionably true. People simply followed in her footsteps, took what she put down as the foundation, and added their own details for their own ends.
And rinse and repeat for
Exactly.
decades and decades
Right.
and decades to where we are today.
What I put here was
Rinse and
Theosophy.
fucking repeat.
Right. Theosophy plus pseudoscience plus German social issues equaled people in fucking ovens with numbers tattooed on them because they aren't really human. They're just things. Things that are endangering our next advancement in human development, just like Helena heard from the masters. And so my question is, what do we think crazy conspiratorial magical nonsense plus Christian nationalism plus American social issues are going to equal, right? That's what really took me by this was like, oh shit, you took the right social issues with, you know, the right set of misinformation and the right spirituality or the right kind of like magical concepts. And you can really wind up in a populace that goes fucking crazy in a mass sense.
Obviously.
Yeah. Isn't that wild how relevant that was? Like, so crazy to watch this. I'm like, oh my God, this is what they're going to say about us. Like, I mean, luckily it didn't go to where it went with the Nazis, but
we have a new president who's going to just like change the tenor, change the mood, but we can't just be, I think that we got comfortable. I know this has been said, not like as an original thought. When Obama, we were like, yay, we did it. We're good people now. We elected a black man. And we were like, yay, I don't know. And we just,
you know, all I know is this, that one thing that we can look at and go, you know, these times maybe they're huge tests, obviously, of if we're going to hold it together. But they may be necessary too, because one, it exposed parts of our nation that we pretended weren't there, which I think is valuable. We have a black senator in Georgia. We have a Jewish senator in Georgia. It's the first of either one of those.
that's awesome.
We have a woman vice president. Yeah, I wish we would have had a woman president 4 years ago. But I mean, she's there.
Yeah.
She's a person of both African and Southeast. I mean, we all of a sudden are in a situation where it's like, oh man, things are looking more like America than ever before from that standpoint.
Well, I
to
feel
me.
like we're able to pick up where we left off, like this little thing that I've always said it's the death knell cry, which we needed to kind of urge our battle on against the hate, the bullshit, and was this like this dying idea, this dying way of being hateful, racist, blah blah blah, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it hadn't died yet. We thought it was gone, but it wasn't dead yet. And as we start to like really move forward as if it's dead, it like rages up. It was like, I'm not dead yet. Fuck you.
Yeah.
And tries to take over, and you have to like turn back around and go,
Yeah.
oh no, fuck, you're dead.
Yeah.
No, you are. And like get back on it and be like, no, this is not.
Which is why we need to keep confronting it, because that's always the way it works. It's like as soon as something big is about to change, those who want to resist that change, the claws come out, they dig in, and it's like at the edge of that cliff that they know they're going over, but they're still scrambling and grabbing every fucking piece of brush and digging their heels in and grabbing whatever they can. I mean, we saw this with with the same-sex marriage issue. As that was heading to an inevitable conclusion, it seemed like, or at least we were heading there. It was ultimately going to happen, whether it happened right then or whether it happened in a couple of years. It's going to happen. All of a sudden, all you see is this anti-gay marriage stuff, and you see California Mormons trying to stop it.
Feel really discouraged, like how oh my gosh, we're so far away from changing, but then all of a sudden it changes.
But then it passes.
Not all of a sudden, like magically, but like because we're actually actively moving in that direction, and then
through the work of very hard working, dedicated, passionate people. We get over that hump, and then notice, like, you're not hearing about fucking people not making cakes for gay couples anymore. Like, there comes this point where they're like,
well, I heard I have heard the
fucking Jesus
argument again of like when people are like, you can't stop Trump from tweeting, whatever it is.
Oh, because it's like the gay birthday, the
said,
gay wedding cake thing.
Yeah,
totally different.
Remember that they're like likening it.
Oh, right.
They were saying, the gays are saying, oh, we can't take Trump off Twitter. Freedom of speech. Oh, freedom of religion. You guys could not bake a cake for us.
So that private company was allowed to like make a decision based off of what they thought was appropriate.
To do whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah, tit for tat, bitch. Yeah. I think there's a lot of legal arguments there that those aren't even the same situations. They're very different. But that's it's an amazing thing to watch right now. I honestly wasn't expecting it to be as familiar going through this, to feel a little bit like a history lesson, and I kept stopping and going, like, drawing all these like parallels, and I'm like, am I just being alarmist? And I'm like, oh no, because we're not even at the alarming part yet. It's like the run up to the alarming part, and I'm seeing these patterns, and I'm so hopeful that we did kind of fucking deal a serious blow to the progression that we were on, that was heading towards maybe potentially some really fucking unthinkable things that were going to happen here. I don't know, but I'm glad that we don't have to find out right now.
Yeah.
We need to keep fighting and not get complacent. You can't let your guard down. Not your guard. That makes it sound so militant. We shouldn't be fighting people, but we can't let ourselves become complacent again to where we go like everything's fine, everything's normal, when it's not.
Yeah.
And we need to keep making it better for everybody.
Yeah.
Including all these people who voted for Trump, who they think that we like want their lives to suck and ours to be good. I'm like, no. That's the point, is you guys shoot yourselves in the foot by backing people who don't give a fuck about what happens to you. Fun times. Anyway, that wraps up our little jaunt through Helena Blavatsky, someone you maybe probably never even heard of.
Never heard of.
And yet she has deep little tendrils
so much of our current
And
thinking.
I mean, the shit that I brought up was all the bad stuff, like we said. Virtually when you go in and you go to like the spirituality section, you open books and you read about all these different spiritual, it is laced with stuff that she brought into the overall landscape. And again, borrowing from other things, right? It was kind of a synthesis of ideas. And so she's incredibly influential. And also, it's a good reminder to be aware of what you believe in and be fucking careful.
And also, like, here's because there's a whole lot of things to follow, believe, and take in as your own, which is what she was doing, right? She's looking around, going, "I think this, and I'm going to read that, and I think that, yeah, and I'm going to take this, and I think that's good," and like, fine, do that for yourself. But fucking have some fucking humility. I know you can't say this to narcissists because they don't
I was gonna
fucking get
say
it.
there is no such thing to
No
her.
such thing.
Yeah.
Because she was probably a narcissist.
The woman showed up at another person's spiritualist performance and hijacked the whole thing, and it wound up being the topic of the thing. She's a brilliant
Manipulative
egomaniac.
narcissist.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I want to say don't be like her. But if you're a narcissist, you're gonna.
You're
So
gonna.
I guess it's like.
What do you say? Narcissists are gonna
Are gonna- but so I guess the warning is to if someone's taking a set of beliefs and saying, "Follow me. This is what you should. This is how you can change your life, and this is what you should believe, and this is the truth, or this is whatever." Don't follow them.
Yeah.
Stop it.
And I would say any philosophy that says this group of people
Do
are
your own thing.
diametrically
You already
opposed to
know.
you,
Trust
or
yourself.
yeah, if they're saying you're in the good group and they're in the bad group, step back. We're all in the same
If
goddamn
it puffs
group.
you up, if it makes you think, hey, I know better than these people. And you don't even. I know you don't think that way. You just hold your ideas and patiently wait for other people to awaken.
I was gonna say, so here was a little surprising thing from the inaugural concert or whatever, right? They're all next up. Tim McGraw and this other country motherfucker are going to sing this song. And the guy introduces it. Some guy wrote a song and sent it to Tim McGraw, and he was so touched by it. Or whatever. They're going to sing the song. And he's all talking about his faith in the Lord and how he really got more in touch with that during the fucking pandemic and quarantine. And I'm like, ugh. First of all, fuck you, Tim McGraw. I don't give a shit about you. But they start singing this song, and of course, it's all very, very Christian and kind of that kind of feel. However, so I'm like watching this. Yeah, I talk out loud to myself, to the TV, and so Marnee, you know that I'm telling other people. Marnee,
Okay.
I'm audibly going what the fuck? We don't need this shit. I just saw John Legend just sing this song and just floor you, and then you're gonna fucking bring this motherfucker in. But so at the end, I'm like, wait a minute, okay, minus that stuff, whatever, they believe that, I don't, I'm totally fine with them believing that. The song was basically why can't we get over hating each other? Why is it left and right? Why is it black and white? That's not how things are. We fucking are the same, and I'm like, oh my god, this is the way to reach
through a country song.
Yeah, it is.
Yes. Okay.
And I found myself deeply appreciative of this song. I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh, holy shit. Okay, if you strip away all the, I don't want to look left or right, I'm going to look up. Fuck off, whatever, look up. Nothing's up there. You need to fucking look in. What's your brain say? Look into stuff that, is real. But he's like, why does it have to be left or right? Why does it have to be black or white? And I'm like, dude, the sooner we can get a hold of the fact that life is not a black and white experience, there's not a them and me, there's not a either this or that. It's the sea of chaotic variance and possibility, and who knows what's going to fucking happen. We'll be better off. And I really appreciate that song. And I'm like, thank you, Christian country guy that I would never fucking hang out with. But I appreciate the message that you're reaching out and you're participating in this as someone who would not normally be seen as someone down. He probably has a big fucking pickup truck with a goddamn American flag on it or whatever, which is fine. But I mean, he tends to match what I would not. And I'm like, at the end of it, I'm like, I even said out loud, Chris, you need to not be so cynical. To myself. Well, my dog was there. Zeus was sitting and looked up at me like, right on, dude. You learned a lesson. My wise dog. He's like Buddha. But yeah, I really appreciate that. And so anyway, I hope you enjoyed this series. It's probably highly a bunch of information that you'll never use again, but it does kind of give you an idea of like, hey,
Yeah.
this is what
This
what-
has
this
happened
is the world we
before.
live in. Is it's full of shit that people made up,
Yeah.
and then people took and changed it according to their thinking, their needs, their agendas, their socioeconomic pressures, their biases, their childhoods, their personal issues. And then it turns into movements that, whoa,
Yeah.
can get out of control.
Watch your movement.
Yeah. And if you don't think that's what just happened in this country, that's just, oh my God, this morning I woke up and I'm like, I've got to go see what is going on in the QAnon world because this is obviously, they were
There
waiting.
was supposed to be a storm.
Oh, no. This morning, when I woke up, I looked at the news, and the first thing, I have all these alerts on all these like Q boards and stuff like that. And there's all these people posting literally like comments like, I'm sitting down with the popcorn just waiting for the arrest to happen. They thought for sure, because they were told
Yeah.
by someone who supposedly had this divine information, according, basically,
Yeah.
that this divine God Emperor Trump was going to spring this master plan, the storm, and Joe Biden, before he could be sworn in, all these law enforcement officials would swoop in, arrest him. Obama, Clintons, they're all there.
They're just gonna like
fucking
take
get
him.
them, and it was all gonna happen. It was already done, and they're just like, I got popcorn. I'm
Instead,
just waiting
their
for the show.
Messiah slunk away
Yes.
in
And then the hours that followed the inauguration, as he's sworn in,
Uh-huh.
it was pretty devastating to watch.
Oh.
And I feel for these people a little bit.
Do you?
I mean, I feel for the situation that they're in. They were taken for a ride. They
Yeah.
were made a fool. I've been
So
there.
are they realizing it?
Some of them are.
Okay.
I don't know if realizing is the word I would use. They're reacting against it and going like, what the fuck? I thought there was a plan.
Uh-huh.
This wasn't supposed to happen.
Uh-huh.
So I think first we got to go through the stages of grief here.
Yeah. Oh,
There are people that were saying, I'm an outcast in my family.
Yeah.
This didn't happen. Other people are saying I'm a laughing stock to my friends and family
Yeah.
because I've been preaching this and
Yeah.
this is what I've been telling you is going to happen. There's going to be a lot of personal devastation in the
Yeah.
wake of this. And that's what I fucking hate Trump for the
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
is that, again, he doesn't care about them.
Yeah.
He didn't care about them one bit.
Yeah.
And he's not going to care about the fact that their lives are fucking ruined. A woman is dead because of a lie
Yeah.
that was told to her and reinforced by this man who they were. It's fucking so
Well,
maddening.
a man told his adult children that if they turned him in for the Capitol insurgents being a part of it, that he would shoot them.
Yeah, it's lunacy, and I'm saying if you're out there and you think, oh, we weren't close to like Nazi Germany level stuff, I don't know.
Yeah.
Not to be hyperbolic, but we were pretty fucking close.
Yeah.
And there's still fucks in the Senate that want
Yeah.
to bring us close. So we need to really keep our fucking our shit together,
Yeah,
our
Josh
minds
Hawley.
working. We need to listen to experts. I saw today was just a parade of competence that I I loved. I
Yes.
felt so bored
So relieving.
and so comforted
So-
by that boredom.
by the boredom.
They're like, let's talk to this expert. I'm like, oh, here's a new take. Wait, you didn't just grab a social media bomb thrower to like tell me about this disease? Like I just feel like if we can, move forward from here, there's real hope.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that yesterday. I'm gonna be honest with you. Yesterday, I'm like, tomorrow's gonna happen. It's gonna be just as shitty. But
No, I've
It was
had
good.
confidence that this was going to be a good thing,
it was good.
calming thing.
And if your reaction was to any of the speeches like "fuck you," "you're lying," I don't know what to say to you. Like the grandness of your conspiracy is impossible. That you have to eventually get to the point where you're like, maybe I'm the one that's fucking like lost in I don't know. Anyway, thanks for listening, and we get to leave this series. So next time will be
Yeah.
something brand new, which will be fun.
Can't wait.
Again, visit us at blasphemypodcast.com and hit us up on Apple Podcasts. You can find us, Blasphemy, and leave a review, rate, and subscribe there. That'd be awesome. You can find us on Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. And yeah, Love you guys. Hope
Thanks.
everyone's hanging in there.
Okay.